Should you require your tenants to have renter's insurance? Even if you don't yet have any properties, you will soon, right? Right? So then this is the question that you should ask and answer as it relates to one of the critical aspects of how you'll run your rental property business.
Husband, father, entrepreneur, realtor, a long list of other titles and descriptions, and landlord. Welcome to the Landlord podcast with me, Jonathan Taylor Smith, also known as JT, following a roadmap to financial freedom through residential rental real estate. Welcome to the Landlord podcast, and Lord podcast.
Welcome to episode number 48. Do you require renter's insurance? That's the question. Should you require your tenants to have renter's insurance? Well, when I first started out, I didn't. It was completely optional, based solely upon the tenant's preference. Although I did make them sign a waiver which stated that they were voluntarily choosing not to get insurance coverage of their own, and so they fully understood that their personal belongings were not covered by my property insurance as the owner. The system that I use to generate my lease has a template that gives the option of stating that failing to have renter's insurance is a lease violation or not. However, I would go with the choice that it's highly recommended but not required, and then add in the insurance waiver to become a part of the lease. I never really thought much about this, as my homes are in, quote, good locations that are not obviously prone to suffer a break-in, and I even offer my tenants Vivint alarm systems to further discourage a break-in. But I later came to understand the risk to me as the owner, landlord, by not requiring renter's insurance. You see, it's not just a matter of covering their personal belongings in the event of a break-in, which is all that I was thinking, but also fire or a tree falling on the property, which does happen, or any other such event that causes damage to the tenant's property within the home. But it's also protection against someone getting hurt inside the home or on the property. Should anything take place at the home that might become an insurance claim or even becoming a lawsuit, having renter's insurance in place will likely mean that it becomes the first source of coverage before my owner's property insurance comes into play. This is a significant consideration. For example, I've got several properties with coverage from the same provider. So if I were to have a claim against one of those properties, it could easily result in my coverage going up, not just for the property in question, for all of my properties with that provider. They could even cancel my coverage for that property, or all of them. And once you are known to have filed a claim on coverage with one provider, it can sort of blackball you with others. It could easily be the case that a claim against my property insurance could end up causing real problems for me with coverage for other or all of my properties. Yet with renter's insurance in place, many claims may never even touch my property insurance and be confined solely to the tenant's renter's insurance. So just think how much better you'll sleep knowing that in the event of a break-in or fire or someone getting hurt at your property, that you've got not one, but two insurance policies in place before things reach you or your LLC, and that your insurance policy may never even come into play as the tenant's policy may be first in line. So I've taken to now requiring renter's insurance and that the management company and or the owning entity for the property be listed as an additional insured on the tenant's renter's insurance policy. In this way, I am directly covered and also get notified in the event of a lapse in the policy coverage. And to make things easier for my tenants, the same system in which they applied for the rental and where they primarily pay their rent, cozy.co, is also where they can order a renter's insurance policy. But I've recently come across a study on renter's insurance at the consumeradvocate.org website, and I'll post the link in the show notes, which provides good insight into the features, options, and providers of renter's insurance policies. There is even an FAQ section within this report that answers some common questions tenants often have as to why they even need renter's insurance, as they may not think they own anything of significant value such that it needs to be insured. I found this information and report to be very insightful as it covers reviews of Progressive, State Farm, Amica, Liberty Mutual, and several other providers of renter's insurance. So consider if you'll be making the same policy change that I made and require renter's insurance of all tenants going forward. If so, you can integrate information such as found in this report to explain this requirement to your existing and prospective new tenants. Why not put an additional layer of protection between you and any liability? Check out episode number 45 on LLC obsession for details of how people get fixated on LLCs for liability protection. But your number one protection is how you operate your business. And adding an additional layer of protection through a tenant renter's insurance requirement that costs you nothing provides a great deal of protection and peace of mind for both you and your tenants. How better to run a rental property business? And having this requirement in place may be a good excuse to start allowing pets in your rental properties, which itself can be a source of additional revenue. And if you are already allowing pets, then you certainly want to have the additional protection of requiring those tenants to have renter's insurance. Or do you want to have someone get bitten by a dog that lives on your property, and now it stands for you and your insurance to pay their medical bills? I just don't need those headaches in my life. Best of all, if you state up front that a tenant-paid renter's insurance policy must be in place as a requirement for occupancy, it will cause a certain number of prospective tenants to self-eliminate themselves from consideration. And those would have been the tenants who caused the majority of your problems. Again, I don't need those headaches in my life. If the relatively small cost of a tenant renter's insurance policy is a cause for concern on their part, then it means their finances are extremely tight, which is certain to quickly become your problem when they can't pay the rent on time. It will also mean they are unable to properly care for the home, so wear and tear will increase. They may not think their belongings are even worthy of insurance protection, so what care do you think they'll apply to your property if they care so little for their own stuff so as to be willing to protect it? Or worse, maybe they think it's your responsibility as the landlord to protect their things, which right there shows you how their tenancy is going to go. So many red flags are raised when a person is not even willing or able to pay a few bucks to protect their own stuff. So make this a requirement of tenancy, even in cases where the rent is subsidized by a third-party organization or entity, such as Section 8. And you can even go as far as making it a lease violation for there ever to not be insurance in place with you listed as a loss payee. This is important because it's not just a policy to protect the tenant's belongings, but also coverage for certain aspects of the property as well. So the tenant is protecting their own stuff while also extending that protection over certain aspects of your property also. And the perfect example of that may be one of the fears of landlords everywhere when a disgruntled tenant places cement in toilets just to get back at you for evicting them or something. It's certainly never happened to me and is likely one of those urban legends as to if it has ever happened with any frequency so as to be a real thing to be concerned about. But how much better for you if it did happen or something like it, and you have a renter's insurance policy in place that lists you as the loss payee, as the damaged party, versus listing only the tenant. And even with you listed as the loss payee, I know it's debatable if the insurance provider would actually pay out to you in such a scenario, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. My point is that with the renter's insurance requirement in force, if you ever do end up with hostility between you and a tenant over an eviction situation, it will surely happen, even for me, at some point. You may be able to bring some sanity and restraint back into the situation and make the tenant think twice about doing any damage by mentioning and thereby reminding them that any property damage done may become both a criminal and legal matter for them that could linger for years, but that you'll likely be protected and made whole by their own renter's insurance policy, which could then get charged back to them. True or not, it's possible under certain circumstances, and maybe just the realization a hostile tenant might need to understand they cannot really do you any harm without potentially harming themselves far worse in the attempt. And so much of being a successful landlord is all about how you deal with people, which should be in a reasonable manner that lessens the likelihood of blowback upon yourself. And I like for as many protections as possible to be placed in between me and any such blowback, even if it's just a perception. Renter's insurance is just one such protection, perception, or whatever you want to consider its value in the end, but I'd rather have it there than not. And I don't even allow for the option of it not being there any longer. How about you?
Thank you for listening to the And Landlord podcast with me, Jonathan Taylor Smith, by Blue Chariot Media, following a roadmap to financial freedom through residential rental real estate. You can find the podcast website and blog at andlandlord.com. The main company site is bluechariot.com. If you've received any value from this podcast, help me, please, to make it available to others, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing and posting your 5-star rating. Plus, share it on social media. I welcome your comments on the blog. And if you'd like to share your landlord horror story or have a comment or suggestion for the show, call 844-USA-BLUE and enter extension 263, which spells "and" on your keypad, as in "and landlord," and leave a message. It may be used on a coming show. Thank you. Be all that you are. And landlord.
Nothing on the preceding show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for personalized advice. The comments and opinions of any guest are their own. Information is not guaranteed. Any investment may have potential for both profit and loss. The host is speaking solely on behalf of Blue Chariot Media, a division of Blue Chariot LLC.